Our topic was caregiver burden. Caregiver burden is when the task of caring for loved ones is left to close family members or spouses rather than professionals, and the stress can become unmanageable, causing psychological distress. The topic is significant to nearly everybody in society because aging is inevitable and humans' life expectancy is longer than ever. More people prefer to be cared for by their loved ones than in a facility for residency and care. Caregivers are most likely suffering from role overload because they most likely have families of their own. The stress that these individuals endure impact their physical, psychological, and emotional well-being. Because of this, it is important for people to be aware of its presence and methods to cope. If the caregiver is part of the sandwich generation, they are most likely raising their own children and are suffering role strain and falling short in some aspects of their life. Physical symptoms that fall beside the psychological signs like anxiety and depression can be tired, run down, difficulty sleeping, a higher chance of developing health problems, and emotionally, they may become resentful or overreact to minor nuisances.
So the agency that I researched was called the COAAA, which stands for the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. It is located at the Jewish Community Center at 1125 College Avenue in Columbus. Caregiver workshops are on the first Thursday of every month, and some of the services that the COAA provides is info and assistance on caregiver burden, counseling, education and training, caregiver respite services, and supplemental services. The mission statement is to provide mature, caring guardians for individuals whose mental impairments so incapacitate them that they are unable to care for themselves or make sound personal decisions in order to enhance the quality of their lives. Some of the values of the COAAA are whether you are an older adult caring for your parents or a professional, the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging is here to offer seniors help and help for those who support them.
So my part of our project was to find a reputable website source on caregiver burden, and I chose JAMA, or JAMA, which is a website that gives accurate and realistic information on caregiver burden, including an informative clinical review about risk factors and interventions. So the article explains that the importance of caregiver burden starts with caregiver burden resulting from providing care for patients with chronic illnesses. It can occur at any of the 43.5 million individuals providing support to midlife or older adults, and caregiver burden is frequently overlooked by clinicians. The study wished to identify the effectiveness of caregiver burden interventions and took a special look into the relationship between demographic and social risk factors and adverse outcomes of caregiver burden. So the website identified risks for caregiver burden as female sex, low educational attainment, residence with the care recipient, higher number of hours spent caregiving, depression, social isolation, financial stress, and lack of choice in being a caregiver. The study went on to suggest psychological interventions along with psychoeducational interventions and pharmacological interventions. And it found that physicians have a responsibility to recognize caregiver burden. Caregiver assessment and intervention should be facilitated to the individual circumstances and coexist in context in which caregiver burden occurs. So in conclusion, I found that the JAMA website provided quality information on caregiver burden by analyzing recent meta-analysis to provide strategies to diagnose, assess, and intervene for caregiver burden in clinical practice.
Okay, so now I'll talk about the effects of culture, family, and the economy on caregiver burden. Being a caregiver comes with many ups and downs. It can be very satisfying, but also very stressful to you and those around you. Studies have shown that ethnic minority groups provide care for loved ones more often than Caucasians. Further studies have shown that African American caregivers experience less caregiver burden than Caucasian caregivers. Caregivers must have the support of their other family members, friends, and/or another form of community. Without this support, caregivers are very susceptible to emotional diseases and even psychological diseases. They can experience chronic illness and suppressed immune systems due to the stress, though depression is probably the biggest concern when it comes to the health of caregivers. This in turn affects the way that you care for your loved ones. Caregivers must practice self-care to reduce the symptoms of caregiver burden. Caregivers also experience financial problems, spending an estimated $2,400 on caregiver expenses.